So here we are, following part 1, where we talked about making the underpinnings of an 18th century outfit. If you haven't seen that, do look for it on our YouTube channel. Now we're going to look at the process of making a gorgeous dress dating to the second half of the 18th century to wear to Wentworth Woodhouse, where I shall see if I can do a bit of period style dancing without tripping over my skirts. To develop the design, I looked at loads of dress images online, on Pinterest, in museums, in YouTube videos, and in my 18th century periodicals. Did I want a not very poetic sounding sack back, also known as a robe à la française, with its triangular stomacher in front and pleated drapes down the back? Or a robe à l'anglaise, with its bodice trimly fitted to the back but still integrated into the skirt? Or a later version with a separate bodice that could be closed rather than pinned to a stomacher? Or a robe à l'italienne, with neat separate bodice and a ruched skirt, also referred to as a polonaise? Or any number of variations and hybrids of these? To better understand this complicated new terrain, I searched for patterns online and ordered a book on 18th century dressmaking. It was helpful, although I sometimes found the written instructions rather confusing and would retreat back to YouTube. But the book had some useful patterns for the sackback and Italienne styles. These I printed out and then adapted to a robe à l'anglaise style that would have an Italienne style pointy bodice in back while still closing with a stomacher in front. Definitely a hybrid. At this point, I could start trying a paper and then fabric mock-up version of the bodice on my sweet, patient mannequin Lucy, on whom I also draped the skirt to get the full effect. I stitched the bodice with a fabulous historic stitch sometimes called the English stitch, or, more mysteriously, the stitch with no name. It really is an amazingly efficient way to quickly and neatly seam top and lining layers all at once. There it was. On to the skirts. I had some much newer but appropriately styled lace curtains tagged for the dressy petticoats, and they worked perfectly. 18th century petticoats are very simple, basically just two large rectangles joined together and pleated onto a waistband. Next, the overskirt. I finally settled on a skirt smoothly descending to just a bit of a train in back. Not being 100% confident though that my hand stitching could achieve perfectly smooth seams. Joining the overskirt seams was the only time in this process that I did resort to my old Singer treadle machine. But I then finished the seams by hand with a folded over mantua maker technique. All this worked well, but then attaching skirt to bodice with carefully placed pleats, that took some doing and doing and doing till I was reasonably satisfied. I then got out some torn antique lace curtains from my coffers and quickly fashioned some nice ruffles or engagements for the sleeves. But at this point, I took a daring detour away from the stomacher. Having to be pinned to the bodice sides, it was just too fiddly and potentially painful. Instead, like other women back in the day, possibly also fed up with stomachers, I cut that same shape into two halves, attaching each to the front bodice sides and closing in the centre. Hooks and eyes were already well in use by then, so I used those along with a bit of extra boning for strength. Much better. Lastly, like icing on a cake, the trim. Hours were spent playing around with lace and bows. How much, how many, where? Finally, decisions made, on it went. All done. But what about shoes? Unable to afford 18th century originals for a grand or two, I bought some cheapy wedding shoes on eBay. Horribly stiff, these cracked almost instantly. Never mind. A local cobbler repaired them and, at my request, cut off the backs, which transformed them into mules, to which I could add still more bows. And so, at last, here we are, properly attired, entering Wentworth Woodhouse. After the long journey of sometimes challenging creation, it's nice to find that this outfit is surprisingly comfortable. One feels supported by the stays and buoyantly kept afloat by the panier and sailing skirts. And now for a little dancing in the wonderful Marble Saloon.